Now this we know for sure. Adolf Fischer did not start the riot. In fact, Adolf Fischer wasn't anywhere near the riot the night that the policemen were killed, but that didn't matter, because Adolf Fischer was part of a labor union that was fighting back against the industrial tycoons of 19th century Chicago, and someone had to pay the price. So they got perjured evidence, they paid people for evidence, for fake testimonies, and on the basis of that evidence, Adolf Fischer was sentenced to death. And on that day, November 11th, 1887, as Adolf Fischer walked to the gallows, as he stood in front of the crowd, he said, "This is the happiest moment of my life." And a moment later, he dropped, broke his neck, hanged. And it was at about that time that a different man, George Eastman, mastered dry photography and started what we know as the Kodak Company. And now George had humble beginnings. He was a champion for the working class, and very quickly he became a multi-millionaire, one of the biggest companies in the world. And he used that money to build libraries, to build clinics, to do all these different things. And what's more, he invented this kind of innovative philosophy of management of giving workers equity, giving them generous time off, giving them more livable wages, right? So he did all these things, was incredibly successful. And one morning on a Monday, he walked up to his desk, wrote a little note, capped his pen, smoked a cigarette, and shot himself. So how is it then that we have these two stories, and there are a lot of parallels there, correct? Both of these people were champions of the working class. Both wanted to see a different world, but one of them, Adolf, was basically a loser. He was a nobody. And on the basis of false evidence, he was killed at a fairly young age. And on the other hand, you have this guy who's a champion of the working class, becomes a millionaire, and modern day probably a billionaire, helps all these people, changes the world, he's a success, he's famous, and he wants to kill himself. And now this story comes from Dan Gilbert, a psychologist and author, and it speaks to this idea that there's really a mystery of happiness here. And in my work, what you learn is how to maybe change your thinking and be a little skeptical of our default, de facto view of happiness. And now, going back to the story, I'll push you here to say, when you change the way you think about things, when you examine assumptions a little more closely, well, let's think about this. So Adolf Fischer, he was basically a nobody, like we said. He was being abused, and he had these opinions that he wanted. He was an advocate for changing kind of workers' rights, but he ultimately wasn't really successful. But finally, on this day, even though it was on the basis of this false evidence, his name is on the front page of the paper. Everyone knows him. His opinions matter. And on some level, I'm sure he was scared, but he feels like a martyr, a hero for the working class. So finally, after all these years, he dies with a sense of significance, the happiest moment of his life. George Eastman, on the other hand, lived a rich life. Like we talked about, he loved to hunt, he loved to fish, he loved to do crafts. And at the age of 71, he was diagnosed with a spinal disease that gave him a lot of chronic pain, reduced his mobility. And so one morning, he sits down at his desk, writes a note that says, "My work is done. Why wait?" Finds his heart and pulls the trigger. So again, we can start to see how when we challenge our original beliefs, we can see how actually maybe there's some reasoning here behind these stories. And again, that's the message. That's why we need to study happiness, because it's such a mystery, and more importantly, it's a central theme of our lives, but we really know so little about it. And that's what we're doing here, and that's what you get with my work. But importantly, what I want to share is that you will not learn about happiness in my work. You will learn happiness. Do you understand that distinction? We will not learn about it, we will learn it. It is not about just intellectual knowledge, but actually embodying it, experiencing it, doing and being, learning happiness. That's the important part of this. Now, what I need to do is just get a commitment from you, and it is this: I need you to prioritize your happiness. Hey, I need you to connect with, why are you here? Why are you watching this video? Why are you engaging with my content? And I say that because the way the brain works is why, how, what. Simon Sinek has a great TED Talk on that, but he talks about how, this intellectual part of our brain is thinking, happiness course, or happiness video, learn about this is great. But the limbic system, the emotional embodied level, works with why. You have to know why we're doing these things and really get in touch with that. And so what I invite you to do is think about this for yourself and for someone else. What really matters in your life? Ultimately, it's your happiness. And you might think about, well, who is someone in your life that you love most? Okay? Who matters most in your life? What matters most in your life? How do you want to show up for that person? And what I want to tell you is that they do not need your success, your money, your advice even, your 2 cents, right? Your stuff. They need your happiness. Thich Nhat Hanh, Buddhist teacher, says to live peacefully and happily is the greatest gift we can give to the world and to our future generations. He says your children don't need your money, they need your happiness. And again, that's what I say. The person you love most or the people you love most, they don't need all these other things that we pay so much attention to. I've got to get all my things done. I've got to do this thing. I got to do that. I got to manage all these things. No. They need your presence and your happiness. And that's why the study of happiness is so important. So I really hope you'll think about that person or those people and connect with that on a deep level. How do you want to show up for them? But as I said, this commitment to prioritize happiness is not just about them, it's about you, right? It's about you. And to do a quick exercise with you, and I'm going to tell you, you can actually pause the video and get your phone out or get a pen and paper, because if you're watching my videos, I will do a lot of reflection and prompts and little exercises. And I encourage you to actually write this out. Think about something that's really like a big goal for you. If I were to say, well, what do you want? Right? Like a magic genie in a lamp. What do you want? What would you do? Okay. And if you have something in mind, or I want to graduate, or I want to get a promotion, or I want to make this amount of money, or I want to start a business, or even if maybe it's something a little more intrinsic, like, well, I just want to be a great parent to my children, or a great husband, or a great mother, whatever it is. Ask yourself why you want that. Why? Why do you want it? Okay, maybe journal about it, write about it. And if you get to an answer, maybe you kind of ask why again. Right? Well, an example of this might be, okay, so let's say me, I want to just, I don't know how I feel about my job. I want to get this job where I can make like pretty good money, right? Let's say 6 figures, and work 30 to 40 hours a week. So it's good work-life balance, but a great career. Okay, well, why do you want that? Well, I want financial stability, and I want to have time to do the things I want to do. Great. So if you're with me here, why do you want that? Again, using your own example, why? Go down another level, maybe another level after that. Why do I want to have financial stability and time to do what I want? Well, I just want to be able to live life on my terms and do things I enjoy when I want to do them and who I want to do it with. Well, why? Again, why? Hey, guest appearance. Why? And one more time, well, why do I want to be able to do the things I want, when I want to do them, with who I want to do it? Well, I want to be happy. That right there. That's it. That's what I'm meant to do in this exercise, is you keep drilling down. Oh, well, why do I want these things? Okay, well, why do I want that? Why? If you keep going back to this why, ultimately it's happiness. And to show you this, take that goal or that thing you're thinking of that's front and center in your mind, something you're spending a lot of time on. And if I were to say, okay, my magic little genie wish is that you can get that thing, you can get that promotion, you can get the perfect job, you can get your soulmate, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. But on one condition is once you get it, you're not allowed to be happy with it. You're not allowed to be satisfied with it. You cannot enjoy it for even a moment. What would you say? Of course you'd say no. So it's not about the thing, it's not about the goal, it's about happiness. And so once I first discovered that, I said, well, why don't I just cut out the middleman, right? And that's not to say you have to abandon your goals or abandon the things in your life that matter, that bring you joy, but it's like, why shouldn't I actually just focus on happiness itself, to understand it, to cultivate it? And again, that's what we're doing with my work. So my hope now is that you're a bit more committed to the study of happiness, to prioritizing your happiness. And I hope you have a sense of urgency, right? Like, this is your life, right? Happiness, like, this is your life. Suzuki Roshi, a great Zen teacher and founded the temple that I lived at, he said, your life is not preparation for something else. And very often that's what it can feel like. In our 20s and even into our 30s, our 40s, 50s, hey, your life is not preparation for something else. This is it. It's about happiness. So, my challenge to you is to start focusing on your happiness every single day. And I don't mean that in a selfish way or like I'm gonna, I don't know, party every day or I've got to quit my job and whatever. No. Simply setting an intention to focus on happiness, to study it and systematically cultivate it, right? Paying attention to the role of it in our lives. And what will happen? Well, I want to share a quick story on that. This one day I was driving home from class at the University of Alabama, and I kind of pulled into this side street by my house, and this guy was out walking his dog. And he was kind of about to step out right as I turned in, and so I kind of slammed on the brakes. He jumped back, and we kind of locked eyes in that mutually frustrated, pissed off way. And he kind of started looking and mouthing things at me. I started mouthing things back, and next thing I know, I whip open my door and start out after him. And just as he turns around, I kind of catch myself saying, "Hey, that was my bad." And he kind of looks at me like I'm crazy, and I guess if I could look at myself, I'm like, I'm crazy. I'm like, yeah, no, I don't know what I was doing. I just came in too fast. It was my bad. And he's like, oh, it's cool. It's whatever, man. I got you. And so I get back in my car and I start to think like, what the hell just happened? But I realized that is the power of focus, of mental training, of prioritizing my happiness. And what I mean by that is I've spent probably the last 5 years close to 4,000 hours doing meditation practice, mindfulness, training my emotional intelligence, my ability to deal with negative emotions. Right? That's all part of what we're doing here with the study of happiness. And that doesn't even include reading books, doing classes, listening to talks. But it's this idea that transformation, okay, especially in who we are and how we interact with the world, happens slowly, then all at once. Right? Day by day, you don't really notice anything. I feel like I'm the same thing. Why am I bother sitting on this cushion or doing my exercise or reading this book or watching Jackson's videos? Don't really notice anything until something happens and you realize you're a totally different person. Right? That's what can happen when you really prioritize improving your life, being happier. And you think about a time maybe in your life where you made such a decision or something happened like that, right? You can see what I mean. Steve Jobs says you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking back. There's this day, that day I decided to take a different way to work and I met this person and blah, blah, blah. right? Or, oh, I was going to do this job, but at the last minute my friend called me. I just ran into him and he said, oh, you should apply for this, and I got this job. Oh, one day I was going home from the gym and I decided to stop and pick something up at the Dollar General. Met a girl there, fell in love with her. That's kind of a personal one, but you get the idea. And so what I hope for you is that this video, or if you decide to join me in one of my courses or programs or coaching, that can be, in maybe some very small level, that type of decision for you. That you look back, and it won't even be me, but it'll be you, and say, you know what, this really made me think about studying happiness. It really made me think about prioritizing my quality of life in a conscious way, in a way of again, study and practice and learning. And that maybe a few months, or maybe in a few years down the road, it will be that type of decision for you where you look back and realize you've been totally changed.